Ever wonder why so many innovators struggled in school? It's a strange pattern, isn't it? Steve Jobs, the visionary behind Apple, was a notorious troublemaker who found formal education stifling. Richard Branson, the billionaire founder of Virgin Group, dropped out at 16, his dyslexia making the rigid classroom environment a nightmare. These aren't just anecdotes, they're data points in a larger, more unsettling picture. In fact, research shows that individuals who exhibit non-conformist traits are a staggering 27% more likely to become entrepreneurs. They see the world differently, ask questions others don't, and refuse to color within the lines that school so carefully draws for us. We often hear that the education system is broken, that it's failing our brightest and most creative minds. We lament its inability to adapt, its outdated methods, and its one-size-fits-all approach. We see these struggles and think, what a waste of potential, but what if that's the wrong way to look at it? What if we approach this problem not as engineers trying to fix a faulty machine, but as political theorists examining a system of power? What if we put on our Machiavellian glasses for a moment? From that perspective, a chilling new hypothesis emerges. Maybe the system isn't failing at all. Maybe it's working exactly as it was designed to. Maybe the goal was never to foster a legion of innovators and critical thinkers who would challenge the status quo. Perhaps the true unstated purpose of traditional schooling is to create a compliant, manageable, and predictable populace. If that's the case, then the system isn't broken. It's a stunning, terrifying success. Let's explore that. So let's start with that central paradox. The people who often change the world are the very same people who the world of school tries to change. We've already mentioned Jobs and Branson, but the list is long and distinguished. Thomas Edison was famously called addled by his teachers. Albert Einstein's rebellious nature and disdain for rote learning are legendary. These aren't just quirky biographical footnotes. They are symptoms of a fundamental disconnect between the qualities required for innovation, curiosity, skepticism, and a willingness to defy convention, and the values prized by traditional education: obedience, memorization, and conformity. School, in its current form, often acts as a filter, and what it filters out is divergence. The research I mentioned earlier, that nonconformists are 27% more likely to become entrepreneurs, isn't just a fun fact. It's an indictment. It suggests that the very psychological traits that lead to groundbreaking success are often penalized or discouraged within the classroom. Think about it. The student who constantly questions the teacher's authority, who gets bored with the preset curriculum and goes off on intellectual tangents, who would rather build something in their garage than complete a worksheet, that student is labeled a problem. They are disruptive. They're not a good student. Yet in the world outside those walls, that same student might just be the next person to invent a new technology or start a movement. This is where Machiavelli's ghost starts whispering in our ear. A prince, he would argue, doesn't want a population of restless innovators. He wants stability, he wants control. An education system designed to serve the state wouldn't be optimized to create millions of little Einsteins and Bransons. Instead, it would be designed to identify and neutralize those very traits. The system isn't failing to educate innovators. It is succeeding in creating a population that is easier to govern. The frustration and alienation felt by these future trailblazers isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. So when we see a brilliant but bored student getting a C-, we should ask a different question. Instead of how is the school failing this student, we should ask, what purpose does it serve to make this student feel like a failure? From a Machiavellian viewpoint, the answer is clear. It reinforces the hierarchy. It teaches the powerful lesson that compliance is rewarded and deviance is punished. It's the first and most important lesson in social control, administered daily for 12 years. The system isn't broken. It's a masterclass in shaping subjects, not citizens. One of the most brilliant aspects of modern control is making people believe they are free. Our schools are masters of this illusion. They talk a great game about critical thinking, student leadership, and preparing students for the 21st century. They have student councils, debate clubs, and project-based learning modules. On the surface, it all looks wonderfully empowering. It seems designed to create independent, thoughtful individuals. But as Machiavelli sagely noted over 500 years ago, the vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances, and the world is made up of the vulgar. We must look past the appearance to the reality of the structure. Think about the actual experience of student empowerment in most schools. A student council might get to choose the theme for the school prom or lobby for a new soda machine in the cafeteria. These are trivial choices, carefully cordoned off from any real power. They are not allowed to question the curriculum, the bell schedule, the grading system, or the fundamental rules of the institution. It's a Potemkin village of autonomy, a carefully constructed facade designed to give the feeling of influence without conceding any actual control. The lesson being taught is that your voice matters, but only within the tiny, insignificant box that authority draws for you. This is a profoundly Machiavellian tactic. A wise ruler doesn't use brute force when subtle manipulation will do. By creating these simulations of democracy and choice, the system inoculates students against genuine rebellion. It channels their desire for agency into harmless, pre-approved outlets. A student who spends a month campaigning to change the mascot is a student who isn't spending that month organizing their peers to protest standardized testing. The illusion of empowerment is a distraction, a clever sleight of hand that keeps the vulgar crowd of students occupied with the superficial, while the deep structures of power remain untouched and unexamined. The result is a graduate who has been trained to confuse activity with action and performance with power. They learn to participate in the system on its own terms, to work within the established rules, and to believe that this is what change looks like. They are taught to be good committee members, not revolutionaries. They are prepared to be middle managers, not founders. Machiavelli would be impressed. The system doesn't need to suppress dissent with force when it can simply redefine it as choosing between two pre-approved options for a bake sale poster. It's a far more elegant and effective form of control. To understand why our schools operate this way, we have to dig into their origin story. And no, it wasn't a benevolent council of philosophers who designed the modern public school system. It was industrialists. Men of power and capital at the turn of the 20th century, like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, and the influential president of Harvard, Charles Eliot. These weren't men concerned with fostering creativity or nurturing the human spirit. They were concerned with building an industrial empire, and they needed a workforce to power it. They needed a system that could reliably produce obedient, punctual, and disciplined factory workers. The model they looked to was the Prussian education system, which was explicitly designed to create docile soldiers and compliant citizens for the state. They imported its core tenets, age-based cohorts, standardized curricula, bells to signal the start and end of work periods, and a top-down command structure with the teacher as the foreman and the principal as the factory manager. Every aspect of the school day was designed to acclimate children to the rhythms and demands of industrial labor. Sit in straight rows, do not talk unless given permission, follow instructions without question, move when the bell tells you to move. This wasn't education, it was conditioning. Crucially, this system was never intended for everyone. The industrialists and elites who designed it sent their own children to very different schools. While the masses were being trained for conformity in public schools, the children of the ruling class were attending elite academies and preparatory schools. There, the curriculum was different. It was rooted in the classical model, emphasizing rhetoric, philosophy, history, and strategy. They weren't being trained to follow orders. They were being trained to give them. This created a deliberate two-tiered system, one for the laborers and one for the managers, one for the subjects and one for the princes. This history isn't just a quaint relic of the past, it is the DNA of our current system. The bells still ring, the students still move in batches based on their manufacture date or age. The emphasis is still on compliance over curiosity. Though the factory floors have largely been replaced by cubicle farms and service counters, the fundamental need for a predictable, manageable workforce remains. The system created by Charles Eliot and his contemporaries was a solution to the labor problem of the industrial age, and its core function, sorting and training a compliant workforce, has remained remarkably intact, even if we now dress it up in the language of empowerment and opportunity. Let's get specific. Think about the rules that govern daily life in most schools. Not the big ones about violence or theft, but the small, seemingly arbitrary ones. No chewing gum. Strict dress codes that police everything from shoulder straps to sock color. Hall passes to regulate movement in a building you're legally required to be in. The requirement to raise your hand and wait to be called on before you can speak. These rules have very little to do with learning. You can absolutely learn calculus while chewing gum. Your understanding of Shakespeare is not dependent on the length of your shorts, so what are these rules really teaching? They are teaching obedience for its own sake. They are conditioning students to accept and adhere to arbitrary authority. When you force a student to comply with a rule that has no logical justification, you are not teaching them reason, you are teaching them submission. You are training their brains to follow the chain of command, regardless of whether the command makes sense. This establishes a powerful psychological pattern. You learn that your own judgment is secondary to the rules imposed from above. This is the very foundation of a manageable workforce and a governable populace. It's a subtle but relentless boot camp for compliance. This connects directly to one of Machiavelli's most famous and most misunderstood dictums, that for a ruler it is better to be feared than to be loved if you cannot be both. Now, in a modern democratic society, overt fear is a bad look. So the system gets clever. It disguises fear as care or safety. The dress code isn't about control, it's about reducing distractions and maintaining a professional environment. The hall pass system isn't about surveillance, it's about student safety. By framing control as benevolence, the system achieves the same result, compliance, without generating resentment. It's a brilliant move. The student who chafes under the rule is made to feel like they are the unreasonable one. Over time, this conditioning works. Psychological studies on conditioned compliance show that repeated adherence to minor arbitrary rules makes individuals more likely to comply with larger, more significant directives later on. The muscle of obedience is strengthened through daily exercise. The system slowly erodes a student's instinct to question why and replaces it with an automatic impulse to ask how. It domesticates the spirit of rebellion, turning potential dissenters into model employees who will follow the company dress code and fill out the proper forms without a second thought. Machiavelli would have called this securing one's state, and our schools do it every single day. Beyond direct rules, the school system employs a more insidious tool of control, the constant, pervasive system of external validation. I'm talking about grades, gold stars, honor rolls, and the teacher's approving smile. From the moment we enter kindergarten, we are placed on a treadmill of seeking approval from figures of authority. Our sense of self-worth becomes tangled up with our performance, as judged by others. A good grade feels like a certificate of our intelligence and value. A bad grade feels like a personal failing, a mark of shame. We are being trained to outsource our sense of purpose. This dependency on external validation is incredibly powerful. It shifts a student's motivation from intrinsic curiosity to extrinsic reward. Instead of asking, what am I passionate about? What problems do I want to solve? The student is conditioned to ask, what will be on the test? What does the teacher want to hear? How do I get an A? The goal ceases to be learning and becomes, instead, the accumulation of positive judgments. This creates a workforce that is hungry for the next promotion, the next quarterly bonus, the next pat on the back from the boss. Rather than a generation of innovators driven by an internal mission, the long-term effects of this are stark. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Educational Psychology directly linked academic perfectionism, the obsessive pursuit of high grades, to higher levels of workplace anxiety and, most importantly, significant risk aversion. This makes perfect sense. If your entire identity is built on getting things right and avoiding the sting of a bad grade, you are not going to be the employee who volunteers for a risky, ambitious project that has a high chance of failure. You will play it safe. You will stick to the proven formula. You will do exactly what is asked of you, and you will do it perfectly, but you will never dare to do what is not asked of you. From a Machiavellian perspective, this is a triumph of social engineering. A population addicted to approval is a population that will never rock the boat. They are too afraid of the disapproval that comes with challenging the status quo. They will police themselves and each other, striving to meet the expectations set by the hierarchy. They will trade their autonomy for security, their purpose for praise. The system doesn't need to build visible walls to keep people in line when it can build invisible psychological cages forged from the fear of disapproval and the hunger for validation. Have you ever noticed how strange the structure of a school day is? At 9 o'clock in the morning, you are studying the fall of the Roman Empire. At 10 o'clock, a bell rings, and you're suddenly expected to care about trigonometric functions. Then, at 11, another bell. And now it's time to analyze the symbolism in The Great Gatsby. Each subject is taught in a sealed-off silo with little to no connection to the others. History is separate from math, which is separate from literature. which is separate from science. This isn't an accident. This fragmentation of knowledge is one of the most effective, if subtle, tools of control the system has. By breaking knowledge into disconnected fragments, the system actively prevents students from developing what is called systems thinking. This is the ability to see the world as a complex, interconnected whole, to understand how different domains influence one another. It's the ability to see how economic policies affect historical events, how scientific discoveries are shaped by cultural values, and how literature reflects the political realities of its time. Without this holistic view, it is incredibly difficult to perceive the larger patterns of power, influence, and control that shape our society. You learn the what, but you never get a chance to ask why on a grand scale. This intellectual division is a classic Machiavellian strategy: divide and conquer. A prince knows that if his subjects are broken into factions, squabbling among themselves, or focused on their own narrow concerns, they will never unite to challenge his rule. The school system does this intellectually. It trains students to think in boxes. The math kids don't talk to the history kids, and neither of them sees how their subjects are deeply intertwined in the real world of finance, policy, and power. Students become specialists in tiny, disconnected fields, unable to see the forest for the trees. This makes them much easier to manage. A citizen who can't connect the dots between economic inequality, historical precedent, and political rhetoric is a citizen who is less likely to effectively question authority. They might be angry about their own specific problem, but they lack the intellectual framework to see it as a symptom of a larger systemic issue. They are left with a pile of puzzle pieces, but are never taught how to assemble them into a coherent picture. And a population that cannot see the full picture of its own condition is a population that will never be a threat to the existing order. In the world of science, business, and art, failure is not just an option, it's a prerequisite for success. Innovation is an iterative process of trying something, failing, learning from that failure, and trying again. James Dyson famously went through over 5,000 failed prototypes before he perfected his vacuum cleaner. This resilience in the face of error is the engine of progress. Now, contrast that with the environment in a typical school. What happens when you fail? You get a big red F circled on your paper. You get a lower GPA. You get shame, parental disappointment, and sometimes even public humiliation. In school, making a mistake is treated not as a learning opportunity, but as a transgression. The entire system is built around finding the one right answer and punishing any deviation from it. This punitive approach to error instills a deep and lasting fear of failure in students. They learn very quickly that it is safer to be cautious than to be creative. It's better to give a simple, correct answer than to attempt a complex, ambitious one that might be wrong. This creates a pervasive culture of risk aversion. Students are being systematically trained to avoid the very behavior that is essential for innovation. Why would a system do this? From a Machiavellian standpoint, it's about maintaining stability. Progress, by its very nature, is destabilizing. It disrupts old industries, challenges existing power structures, and overturns established truths. A state, or a ruling class, that prioritizes stability over progress would naturally want to cultivate a population that is afraid to take risks. A fearful, risk-averse populace is a predictable and stable populace. They will not launch disruptive startups, they will not pioneer radical social movements, and they will not challenge the fundamental assumptions upon which the system is built. The shaming of failure is a powerful tool for social control. It teaches students that the cost of being wrong is unacceptably high. This lesson is carried into adulthood, creating employees who are afraid to speak up in meetings, citizens who are afraid to challenge official narratives, and individuals who are afraid to pursue their own unconventional ideas. The system sacrifices the dynamism of progress on the altar of order. It prefers 1,000 students who can correctly fill in a bubble sheet to one student who might fail spectacularly while trying to invent something the world has never seen before. Of all the stories our schools tell us, perhaps the most powerful and deceptive is the myth of meritocracy. The idea is simple and, honestly quite seductive. School is a level playing field where the smartest and hardest working students rise to the top, regardless of their background. Your success is determined by your individual merit, as measured by grades and test scores. This creates a hyper-competitive environment. Students aren't just learning, They are competing against each other for class rank, for spots in advanced programs, and for admission to prestigious universities. It's a zero-sum game. For you to win, someone else has to lose. This constant competition serves a brilliant Machiavellian purpose. It prevents the formation of solidarity among the students. Instead of seeing each other as allies in the shared project of learning, they are conditioned to see each other as rivals. The student who gets a 98 is not happy for the student who gets a 99. They are envious. This atomizes the student body, making collective action nearly impossible. Why would you unite with your classmates to challenge an unfair grading policy when you are secretly hoping that policy will cause them to score lower than you? Machiavelli explicitly advised the prince to encourage discord among his subjects, to keep them divided so they could not unite against him. The school grading curve is a masterstroke of this principle. It enforces a hierarchy based on merit and then convinces everyone that the hierarchy is fair and natural. Those at the top believe they have earned their position and deserve their privileges. Those at the bottom are taught to believe their failure is their own fault. They just didn't work hard enough or weren't smart enough. This internalizes the hierarchy and legitimizes inequality. This system effectively neuters any potential challenge to the authority structure. By framing life as an individual race, it distracts everyone from the fact that the track itself might be rigged. Students are too busy competing with each other to look up and question the people who designed the race, who set the rules, and who benefit from the outcome. The myth of meritocracy is the ultimate tool for maintaining the status quo because it convinces the subjects to police each other and to blame themselves for the failures of the system. It's not just a teaching method, it's a political strategy of the highest order. So, are we doomed to this Machiavellian machine? Not necessarily. The existence of this system doesn't mean alternatives are impossible. In fact, they're already here. We see glimpses of a different path in places like Finland, where collaboration is valued over competition. We see it in Montessori schools, where intrinsic curiosity guides the learning process. We see it in Sugata Mitra's hole-in-the-wall experiments, which showed that children, given autonomy and access to information, can teach themselves complex subjects with minimal adult intervention. These models show what's possible when the goal is to cultivate curiosity and empower the individual, not to condition them. It's also telling to look at the education that the powerful still reserve for their own. The world's elite schools, the modern equivalent of the academies that trained the children of industrialists, don't focus on rote memorization and compliance. They teach history, grand strategy, rhetoric, and resilience, the very qualities Machiavelli admired in a leader. They are not training their children to be obedient workers, they are training them to rule. The existence of this parallel system is the ultimate proof that the mainstream system is a conscious choice designed to achieve a specific outcome for a specific class of people. Ultimately, the question we must ask ourselves is this: what is the purpose of education? The answer reveals the kind of society we want to build. If our goal is to raise citizens, critical, engaged, innovative individuals capable of self-governance and challenging authority, then the system as it stands must be fundamentally transformed. But if the goal is to raise subjects, compliant, manageable, and predictable cogs for the economic and political machine, then we must face the chilling conclusion that the system isn't broken at all. It's working perfectly. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and visit our online store at metanoiamedia.store.